I'm Hubert Peters. I was born in Starkweather, North Dakota, 1920, January 11, 1920. And I understand that the weather was so fierce there at that particular time in North Dakota, which isn't too far from, Starkweather isn't too far from the Canadian border. And the weather was so fierce that they couldn't get anybody into the home to take care of my mother when I was having birth. So I was born without a doctor or anybody around. And I always wonder, well, I wonder who's the one give me the first slap to get me started going. We stayed there for about 4 years, and then we moved down to Conception, Missouri, small town in Missouri, and that's where I grew up. And I stayed there until I went into military service. I took a job in Kansas City, Missouri, and I was working at a Kansas City country club. And we had the radio at that time. And they announced the attack by the Japanese. So it kind of shook me up for a while. I figured something was going to happen. I thought it'd be best if I didn't have any idea how long this war was going to last. I didn't want to get myself tied up by enlisting, so I waited. And so I got drafted, but I got drafted pretty quick after the beginning of the year. Actually, I was drafted in May of 1942. I was just a young fellow. Well, I was 22 years old. Not real young, but 22. Full of life and energy and ready to go do something. I wanted to do something with my life. But I was drafted and taken by bus down to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. And at that point, I was inducted into the Army and sworn in, and I can remember that day pretty well. Never been around too much, and it was quite an experience for me. We stayed there in Leavenworth just long enough to get army gear, clothes, and so forth. And then we were put on a troop train, and they wouldn't tell us where we were going to go. And that was really something for me. Not knowing where I was going to go, where I was going to end up at, or anything. We rode on that thing overnight, and the next day when we got off, we were in Texas, deep in the heart of Texas. And we were in Camp Walters was the first place we took our basic training. And that lasted 3 months there. And then from there I went into Camp Swift in Texas, near Austin, Texas. And that's where we started. I learned where we're going to be in an anti-tank group called 820th Tank Destroyer Battalion. I was chosen to be their communications chief. And they sent me to school, taught me how to repair radios and how to use them for communication. And I guess that was my good thing. I became communication chief later on. I was promoted to staff sergeant, and we did some more training, a lot of training. And finally we got moved to Camp Breckenridge, Kentucky. And that was our staging area for going overseas. Around September, we left for Boston, 1944. September 1944, we left for Boston, and we boarded ship at Boston, and nice big troop carrier, very nice. And I said, hey, this is great. First time I've ever been to the ocean. I've never been out of Conception, Missouri, or state of Missouri very much at all. So this is all new and kind of exciting. We ended up at Liverpool, England, and at that time spent a day or two there getting acclimated with England. Then we were put on a troop train, and we were taken down to Southampton, England. And at that place we were loaded onto a cargo troop carrier, and that took us across the channel. And I still remember us landing on that channel. We were taken to Omaha Beach, and we had to climb down these rope ladders, the rope ladders on a boat, and into an LSD or landing ship, And that took us in as close as they could to the shore, and we had to walk in the water waist deep and to get on land. And then this Omaha Beach had a huge hill we had to climb and go up that. I still remember going up that huge hill. Of course, that was all secured at that time, so there wasn't much danger of anything. So, and I always remember one instance. They always told us, keep good track of that rifle of yours. That's your only protection. And as I was going on down the rope ladder, here was a fellow right beside me, or he was above me. He let go his rifle, he lost control, and I saw that rifle go all the way down and hit the water, and it was gone. I said, oh, that poor fella. After climbing up that big hill, we got in trucks, and they took us to a spot where we had to gather our equipment, anti-tank equipment and guns and so forth. But there we lived out in the snow. It was winter time at that time. Boy, it was that cold. We put up our little pup tents and just slept right on the snowy ground. It was cold. And we'd get out to go to get our food and have meetings and so forth. And after about 3 weeks of that, then all of our equipment started coming in, and then we were able to move around. Well, we had pretty good clothing that was state-borne. You had to keep from getting wet. That was the big thing. Once you got wet, it wasn't too good. So once the equipment started coming, then we were moved then pretty much into the line of battle, and we were replacing a tank destroyer group that had been there for a while, and they were getting pretty tired, and their equipment was worn out and so forth. We replaced them gun for gun and man for man on the front lines. It was called the Siegfried Lines, and it was it was east of St. Vith, Belgium. I remember going through that to get to there. But we were in the German property, Winterset, Germany, I think was the name of the area. And it was on the Siegfried Lines, and the Germans were maybe a half a mile away from us. And so you could almost see what they were doing, and they were watching us. I was in the headquarters department, and that was the company commander's place. And the first sergeant and I. And so we had 3 platoons, and we had telephone wire between all 3 platoons and back up to the headquarters. So everything was going fine, and every once in a while a line would break, and I'd have to go out and fix that line. And I had 2 fellows that worked with me. One was a radio repairman, and the other was a radio operator. So we were pretty comfortable there for about a couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden there was a lot of artillery going off during the night, and I said, oh well, I bet you my phone lines are going to be out from that. And sure enough, we had no communication to the first platoon anyway. Anyway, so I says, well, I put on my gear and I went out, and in doing that, I had a telephone in my pocket, and I would I would check into the wiring at one point and then call back and see which side answered, the first platoon or the headquarters. well, first time was headquarters, so you know that the break is further on, so you just go down another 100 yards or say, and actually visualize the wiring. And then all of a sudden the Germans caught me out there in the field. I had to go across an open part in the field. The Germans spotted me, and they started loading that field with artillery and you know I can't think of the term. Anyways, all types of fireworks was coming in on me and popping all around me. And I said, "Wow, I'm in trouble." And I was in the middle of an open field, and I said, "This is no good." And it was getting heavier, and they were getting closer and closer to where I was. They were zeroing in on me, and I started crawling on the ground to keep myself low. And what do you know? There was a foxhole right there. I jumped in that foxhole, and it was deep enough to my whole body was down inside, and my head was under the ground. And the only thing it is about six inches of water, melted snow down in the bottom, and I had to stand in that. But man, did I worry, because those shots kept coming closer and closer to my area, to my foxhole. Finally, they let up on me, and I stuck my head out, and that was the mistake, because they came right back at me again. I said, "This time I'm gone." But I stayed there for a while, and pretty soon they stopped. And I said, "This is no good." And I got out of there, and I ran zigzag motions all the way, because I had to retrace my steps to get back to a safe area. And I heard those bullets zinging over my head. Oh man, they were close, because one was just right on top of me. But I managed to make it back to safety. And I went running back up to the company commander's office, and I was trying to explain, "Hey, the Germans are really firing at us this morning." They said, "Don't worry about that. We got to get out of here. The Germans are attacking in full force." And everybody they had moved as much as they could out, and everybody was gone, but there was a truck loaded up with coal. I don't know what there was to do with coal. And they had no other room in the front parts. It says, "Sergeant Peters, you just jump right in there and stay." So there I was. I laid in that truck, and we took off as fast as we could. And then I find out later on that was the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge. We were right at the center point of where they made one of their big attack points. I don't know what happened, but I was afraid they were. If I hadn't come back when I did, I'd have been left there, because they were just ready to pull out, and they didn't even have time for me to say anything. They said, "Let's get out of here." And of course the company was we were beat up pretty badly, lost quite a few of our people and all of our equipment. We had to get all new equipment. We ran all day, just stay in that truck all day. And what was discouraging at that time in my life was I wanted that war to get over with. I thought, well, while we were having kind of easy going, I said, well, maybe this war is going to end up and I can get back home and get on with my life. Well, and when I was laying there in the back of that truck, going along, and I didn't know where we was going or anything. I said, "Oh, this war is not over yet." My feet were just soaked. I was just really cold and didn't have any food, and I was demoralized, and I really felt bad. We had to pull over and wait, because the reinforcement tanks, artillery, all kinds of vehicles started moving up against the Germans and to stop the attack. And then I was more confident that we were not going to lose this war. I never got a scratch, but there were sometimes it was very, very close. You know, when we were in New Belgium, going back to New Belgium, the Germans had a kind of a rocket ship, or they call it a buzz bomb. We call it the buzz bomb. It was a motorized. It was a vehicle that carried a bomb, and it would go as far as the fuel. It had fuel. And when the fuel ran out, the buzzing stopped, and you knew that bomb was coming down somewhere. And so if the putt-putt kept going, you felt safe. Well, it's gone, it's going. They were really aiming those at England. But sometimes they would miss their mark and didn't have enough fuel. And one of them or two of them came down right down in that town where we were at, New Belgium. And it killed several of the local people. And some of our men got injuries because of flying glass and stuff like that. So we went to St. Vith, Belgium, and that was there was a lot of activity going on there. Troops going a lot of different directions. So we finally found our way to New Belgium, and we got there about 2 days before Christmas. And that was the first time we stopped running at that point. We were New Belgium. And at that time, then they billeted us into homes with the Belgian people opened up their doors and told our commander that we could stay in their homes. So about 5 or 6 of us stayed in one home, and 4 or 5 in another home, and so forth. And so we were all taken care of for a while, and it was kind of nice to get into a warm home. And of course, we were fed by our own company took care of our food. We'd go out and meet during the days and then come back there for nighttime. I learned to speak a little French. I learned to speak French just from them. And this family had 2 small children, about 5 years and maybe 3 years old. And those kids took a liking to me. For some reason or other, they liked me. And they would come sit on my lap and jabber in French, and I had a hard time getting along. I still was able to communicate with them enough to get along with them. One time, some little girl comes up and she has a letter from an American soldier written in English, and she says, "I don't know what it's saying," and she says, "Can you interpret this for me?" So I had to do that for that little girl. But I didn't do a very good job because I didn't know that much French. But we stayed there for about 2 months. After we got beat up in the Battle of Bulge, and we were in New Belgium, they had little trips that you could, that your company sent you on to recuperate. And since there was a lot of mental anguish and all this, I got a 3-day pass into Paris. And so I got into Paris, and it was, I got a nice room in a very nice hotel in Paris, downtown Paris, and we had, they served us nice food, really good food in their restaurants, and that was free for us. It was all paid for. But the first night I was there, the Glenn Miller band was playing was going to entertain us that evening. And I sat down at the table where I sat while one of the band members come over and sat beside me. And so we chatted. I said, "Well, I really like Glenn Miller's band." He said, "Yeah, but we're in trouble." He says, "Glenn Miller went on a bombing trip, accompanied a bombing trip over Germany, and he didn't come back." And so they did have the show, but it wasn't the Glenn Miller show. But see, we had lost all of our equipment when we left that our spot in winter spent Germany. We lost all of our equipment, everything. We just got out just with our lives and with whatever vehicles you had. So we didn't have anything left, so we had to be reinforced with all new equipment. We went back up the front lines, and we were in the Ruhr Valley of Germany, and we were at that time attached to the 3rd Army. We moved around a lot, fast. We were moving around, getting to battles and getting in and out of battles, and I can still remember one night we stopped running or chasing, and went to sleep on the ground. We didn't even set up tents or anything. We just laid down on the ground, and we had we made our beds right on the ground and slept for the night. And next morning when we got up, we found out that some Germans had visited us and cut the throats of about a half a dozen of our people, and that was a bad situation. We thought we were relatively safe, we're all together. We did have guards, but they sneaked in and took care of some of our people. I can remember going by a machine gun group that by the time I in my company commander's vehicle got up there, there were all these machine gun troops all killed, just laying there all over the place, and it was kind of gory. I lost my 2 buddies. Remember, I had a radio operator and a radio repairman. Both of them lost their lives over there. Well, no, one, the radio repairman lost his life. He was injured and captured by the Germans, and we found out later on that he died in the prison of war camp. The other fellow was injured, and he ended up in the Veterans Hospital. After the Battle of the Bulge, and we had nice vehicles to ride in there. I was still in the company commander's vehicle. We had a nice armored vehicle that was very fast moving, had a 50 caliber machine gun on it, and nice big radio, and I was the operator. And there was a time when we were in Germany, and we ran into an ambush by the Germans, and they ambushed us, and we were in a small town. The company commander, who was riding the vehicle with me, and the driver says, well, we're going to run for cover. We're going to leave you in this vehicle and close you up, put the lid down on you, and you keep radio communication, because we had to have radio communication. So they ran for cover, and I stayed in that thing. And then we were attacked. My vehicle got several hits by their ammunition, but it withstood that. I stayed there and kept radio communication, and later on I got a Bronze Star for that. Boy, it was scary, I tell you. I didn't know whether they were going to come out of that alive or not. But actually, I had a worse time with when I told you about it out in the open field. That was the worst time that I had. This and there was a little bit secondary to it, but I didn't know what was going to happen. I had confidence that vehicle was going to hold up, and it did, because when they finally stopped shelling, we could see the places where it hit the vehicle that I was in, and it just made, you know how something will melt metal? They had pockets of metal around it, but that was it. It must have been about half hour, I'd say. Yeah, it was scary. We had tanks, and we had battles with tanks, and we had battle with the infantry too. And mostly artillery type peoples. We had anti-tank groups. We just had firepower that was very fast moving, and we could go go in real fast, fire, and then get back out again. Well, we started out with half tracks, a half track that pulled a 3-inch gun. And when we got the position where we wanted to fight, we would have to take the gun away loose from the back of the half track, and then point it at the Germans. So that was kind of it was kind of a clumsy thing. Finally, when we got re-equipped at New Belgium, we had self-controlled vehicles that had the tanks and the guns all in one piece. And now we were very mobile, and we could really move out, and we were much better equipped. We gave the Germans one heck of a hard time. We really did. But then we kept moving and going forth, and finally we had to go down to Czechoslovakia, and that was kind of a long trip, and we took a trip down, and we went through Heidelberg, Germany, and Darmstadt, and some big cities in Germany, and those were liberated. We were probably some of the first troops into Darmstadt, and we went all the way down to Czechoslovakia, and then we got in some more battles with the Germans down there. And while we were in Czechoslovakia, one day the word came through, it was in May, that the Germans have given up. I said, oh, finally, this is over with. And at that time we went into we were in Czechoslovakia, and we had a little time off then, so I went into one of those, I and my buddies went into a local bar that they had, where they served a little wine and a little something like beer. And they had the radio going on, having music going on. And so we sat around the bar table, and we had a few drinks, and pretty soon the radio come on with some patriotic song, and all the patrons of the bar stood up. You stood at attention, because apparently it was a patriotic song for their country. So we stood up too, just to be polite. And then it was over. We all sat down and everything. Pretty soon along they started a song, and here was Bing Crosby singing. So we stood up, and they all stood up, and they thought, man, that's a patriotic song. A couple of gentlemen came over to us, and they could speak English. And they apparently were German people had owned factories and so forth. They were businessmen. And they kind of apologized to us for why Hitler is getting us into this condition. But they says, we had nothing to do with it. It seemed like that the country just went wild after Hitler got them all aroused, and there was no way they could stop it. So they kind of excused themselves and excused their actions. We got along pretty good with the people, because at one time we pulled in at an area, and we needed to get some rest. And since I could speak a little German, I took German. I had a couple of years of college German. I was asked to go out and knock on the doors of people's houses and ask for places if they had a place for our soldiers to sleep for the night. And I would get 3 or 4 in one place, then go on to the next house, get some more, and they were very well, yes, come in. Well, then a few days later on, we started our trip back to France to return back home. But we would go along the road and be driving in our vehicles, and coming against us were the defeated German soldiers walking home. No weapons in sight, and they were downcast and just walking back home. They knew the war was over, and they were returning home. I just felt sorry for those We didn't bother them, they didn't bother us. It seemed like it just stopped all of a sudden as far as I was concerned. It was over. So we were in a convoy going through, we went through a lot of places, and it was kind of a sightseeing trip on the way back because we were in Czechoslovakia and we had to go through parts of France and parts of Germany, and oh yeah, I saw terrible devastation. Whole towns just flattened on the ground. Oh, I never saw so much devastation in my life. What a terrible waste it was. War is such a terrible waste. And one of the places I went to, I asked if they had a place, Ein Platz für Soldaten zu schlafen. Their name was Peters. And I said, I'm Sergeant Peters. They weren't related because the name of Peters is a very common name. And if you know, even here in America, there's a lot of people named Peters. And so they said, hey, they asked me then to come back after I got through with my duties and in the evening. And I went back then and to them, and they welcomed me in the house and got out their best coffee that they had, and all the family crowded around. And I tried my best with the German that I knew, but you know, in Germany, a lot of you get colloquialisms in there, and sometimes they didn't understand what I was saying. And I was speaking high German and they were low German. But when the war ended, we were headed back in about 2 weeks' time. We were on a boat started homeward. We boarded a troop ship that took us home, and it was a long, slow ride. And we came into Hampton Beach, Virginia, Hampton Roads. Anyways, in Virginia, and they had a big welcome home steak dinner for us. And at that time, then we were given a 30-day leave to go home and recuperate. And I was given papers that on August the 30th, 1945, that I was supposed to come back and report back into Jefferson Barracks in Missouri and get prepared for going over to fight the Japanese. So while I was home, the Japanese surrendered too, and so that took care of that. I was really happy about that because I didn't want to go over there and do any more fighting. I was fed up. I wanted to get home and get on with my life. So our company kind of broke up real fast, and it broke up while I was, our company broke up actually when we landed in Virginia. Everybody went in different directions. Everybody got a furlough home, and everybody was supposed to go back to a certain spot. And so we never did have to go back to that spot. So my company just broke up at that time, and I had to go back. But I went to Indianapolis, and there we stayed for another month or two, and then eventually I got discharged from the duty and got sent home. You had to have so many points to get out of the service, to be released, and so I had to spend about 2 or 3 months there, and then I got released. I went to Benedictine College in my small town of Conception, Missouri. There's a Benedictine monastery there, and they taught a liberal arts group, and that's where I learned my German and learned my Latin and so forth. Then I wanted to use the GI Bill, and so I had to go to Kansas City from Conception, Missouri. I caught a bus down to Kansas City and went to the Veterans Administration and said, well, I want to sign up to go to college. I want to get an engineering degree because we get free tuition. And they says, well, we'd like to send you, but it's hard. I wanted to go to the University of Missouri. He says, oh, it'll take too long to get in there. They're just so overcrowded with people. And I said, why don't you go to the small school here in Kansas City there's a Findlay Engineering College. And he says, since you want to be an engineer, why don't you just go there? So I says, well, all right. So I did. I says, well, since I can't get in, I was anxious. I wanted to get my degree and go out and get a job and then get married. So I went to this school, and it was one of these fast-paced courses. And when I graduated, why, I looked around and said, well, now who's going to come in and recruit me? There was nobody came but IBM, and they were looking for technicians. They didn't want engineers because they didn't think we had a good enough school for engineering. And so I said, oh, this is no good. So I had to go on my own, and I finally found a job in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania with Westinghouse. And that was my first job after I got my degree in electrical engineering. I took poor jobs in a way that weren't really strong engineering jobs because I didn't have the college background that I needed. And I always says, well, I got cheated. You know, I should have got a better school when I had the chance, but I was anxious. I wanted to get it over with, and I said, I'll take what you got. But I went from there, and I did all right for myself. I became an electrical engineer, and I got jobs with different companies. I finally ended up with Western Electric in Chicago, and I went on up the ladder with them, and I did very well. I was produced testing and test gear for all switch gear that the Western Electric made. We made a lot of like intercom systems, switching equipment for PBXs. We built a lot of big PBXs, and I learned that PBX I knew that circuitry so well that when something went wrong in the field, I was the guy that they sent out, and I had to fix it. So I did a lot of traveling. Okay. And in one of those trips to Chicago, I met some of my old Army buddies there. And I did meet some of my old buddies in some of my following trips, and renewed some of the things. They did have reunions, but I was so busy working then I didn't have time to go, and so I never did go back to any of the reunions. When we were at Camp Breckenridge, Kentucky, they had USO dances, and we would go into the dances just to be entertained, and there was this nice little girl, and I met her, and we got married later on after I got out of service. I was halfway through college, and then we got married during the spring break. And my wife was a den mother for the Scouts, Cub Scouts, and I became some of these administrative positions. And I was the awards chairman. I had to pass out all the awards and stuff like that. My oldest boy went to University of Colorado, got a degree in chemistry, and then he was selected to get a PhD, and he went to Iowa State University and got a PhD in chemistry. And from there he went to Philadelphia, where the East Coast, where a lot of the chemistry plants are at, and that's where he's at today. So he's married and has 2 boys.
What's his name?
Tim.
Okay.
And then my second boy, David, got caught up in the computer work, and he got into programming, and he lives in Larkspur, Colorado, and he's in a management position with Informix. So, and he does a lot of traveling for them. And my third boy, the youngest boy, became a Catholic priest. And then he decided that wasn't, he got so lonesome that he dropped out of being a Catholic priest, and he went to the Lutheran religion, and he is now a Lutheran minister, pastor of a church here in Denver. Well, I got transferred. I was with the AT&T then, and they built this new plant out here on 120th and I-25 near there, the big plant, and it was a Western Electric plant and a Bell Labs plant combined. And we got transferred from Omaha, Nebraska out here. And so we were given a week's time to come out here and visit the area and find a place to live, all in 1 week. And so we looked at Broomfield and thought, this is a nice town. We bought a house very fast. This house here was being under construction. So we bought it, and then we got moved out here and moved into this house. We stayed here ever since. I kind of hate to see all the growth. I really do. It was so nice when we first came out here. It was just a small town in 1969. It was a lovely place to live. Just a great place. And we loved Colorado because we lived in Omaha, Nebraska for quite a while. I worked with Western Electric back there. And we lived in a small town of Papillion, Nebraska. But oh, the winters were severe. Oh man, they were rough. And so when we got a chance to transfer out here, I took it. I would say a lot of them don't get challenged, and they kind of wander off on their own, and they seem to want things given to them more than trying to go out and get them. When I grew up, I had to fight for everything I did. Everything. Because we came from a very poor family. They couldn't send me to college. They couldn't do anything for me. And when I went to the Benedictine monastery to their school, 2 years, liberal arts, I worked during the summer months over there to pay my tuition. And that was the only way I could go to get into college at all. It wasn't easy.